Hello and welcome to the Ann Peru Experience. It is 2020. We are still in the midst of a nationwide quarantine, which just today got extended to April 30th. And we're going to be talking about episode 9. Now, for those of you who don't know, I think that it's important, especially with the way that we're going, specifically me, with the way we're going to be talking about episode 9 today, is to preface and say that we're once again going to be engaging with the material that's presented, in the words of my broadcast hero, Joseph Scrimshaw. I think I speak for my other hosts when I say that the sequel trilogy, the Disney trilogy, is so completely diverted from the path that anyone who was a fan of Star Wars thought that the story of Luke Skywalker and Leia and Han and Chewie and Lando and the gang were going to go, that in order for us to watch these movies, we've almost had to fracture our own minds like MK Ultra patients. So when I say that I like episode 9, I like it the most of the Disney trilogy. I like that there's a lot of very fun elements about it, but I do not like that it is the third movie that finally just decimates anything that resembles canon from the George Lucas story and universe. And we're going to be judging it on that criteria. So once again, we're not going to just piss and moan, because that's no fun to listen to. We're not going to be using ad hominem attacks against any of the producers or any of the higher ups, or at least we're going to do our best not to.
Wait, so I didn't once insult Admiral Gender Studies last episode, did I?
No, you did a very good job.
Wow. You know what? I think I deserve a gold star for that.
Jeff, if you would like to take the next 2 minutes to fully fillet Admiral Gender Studies, I think me and Ed, as a show of good faith, would secede you the floor.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to get a job when this whole thing is over, so I probably shouldn't do it.
That's very fair. There's a lot of growth happening on the Emperor Experience.
I mean, I really think just that Kevin's bruises still haven't healed from how tightly I was squeezing his arm.
My left arm hurts when it rains. Yeah.
So anyway.
So with that all being said, we have Return of the Jedi on in the background,
which is effectively the movie that Rise of Skywalker was trying to anyway.
Yeah, which is the spiritual parallel, at least in the mind of J.J. Abrams, to the Rise of Skywalker, but the same way that The Last Jedi, it pales in comparison to The Empire Strikes Back. The Rise of Skywalker does its best to wrap up what they believe to be a 9-movie saga, when in actuality they did their best to wrap up a trilogy, and there are elements of the story that you could connect to the other 6. But once again, Jeff and Kevin and I really don't feel that 7, 8, and 9 show the true vision of what George Lucas would have wanted. And as a result, I think that as time goes on, that's where the line of demarcation is going to be for most fans, which is that episode 6 is officially where George Lucas's story came to a close, and that if you want to continue to enjoy Star Wars on any level, we have 3 more movies that you can watch, but try not to connect them to the previous 6, because you're just going to give yourself a headache. But if you like lights and sounds and special effects and, you know, nostalgic callbacks and certainly John Williams music, then we've got a trilogy for you, and it's called the Disney Trilogy. and I think that's how it's going to be. But getting right into the meat and potatoes, we're going to go right to my list because we found that the last 2 episodes have been helped along in terms of pacing and structure by following my like and dislike list, which is not a point-by-point summary of the movies. These are simply observations that I made over multiple viewings and then just my general musings about the 3 movies while I've been sitting in quarantine over at the running store, where I've been occasionally answering the phone, occasionally having to give a box to a UPS driver so that he can take them somewhere else, and generally sitting with my thumb up my ass. But fortunately, my other hand, I've been using to write my notes on my phone because I'm technologically advanced, and I recently noticed that you can write notes on your phone and save them, and you can save on paper that way. So I'm being green. So anyway, let's get right to it. First thing that I like, C-3PO, which is apropos because he's on screen right now trying to knock on Jabba's door. C-3PO entertaining and is fun and is well used as a member of the gang, shall we say, in any of the 3 movies. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah.
There were some great C-3PO moments.
It felt weird just because, I thought if any character would be underutilized, it would be C-3PO, just because it didn't seem like Abrams had any real interest in the character in The Force Awakens outside of giving him a bit of a cosmetic differentiator to make him say that this is my C-3PO, but... Sorry, what was that?
Well, that's a Jeff was just bringing up the theory that Doomcock originally put out there that he had gotten from, as he claims, a source inside Lucasfilm, that the reason why so much of the trilogy is familiar to us, but even classic characters are ever so slightly different, is because of the potential for royalties to be paid on likeness rights, even though the intellectual property between Lucas and Disney changed hands, which most people have refuted, but I'm not a lawyer, so what do I know?
Yeah, I was just speaking mainly from how the character was used in Abrams' last crack at these characters compared to now. It's a night and day difference.
Yeah, I mean...
Yes.
I like C-3PO, but he's not the reason why I like Star Wars. So if he's the main linchpin character in this movie that you really draw to, the movie's probably not going to do it for me. Like when I first saw A New Hope, I didn't say, "Oh wow!" Even though we're viewing the story through the eyes of the droids, and at least in episode 4, my 4-year-old or 5-year-old self didn't gravitate to C-3PO.
Well, that's fair. I mean, really, the reason why I brought him up first is because I started my notes, as I mentioned, when I was at the running store, as opposed to while watching the movie. So the very first thing that popped into my mind when I said to myself, what did I like about this movie? Very first thing that I thought of was how well C-3PO is used, which is not necessarily a commentary on anything else. C-3PO really stood out as being particularly well used and with appropriate Star Wars humor, not Marvel humor.
They fly now.
Well, that isn't so bad in context, And again, without biting at the ankles of that scene where you say like, oh well, what about Boba Fett and what about Rocket Troopers and what about this and what about that? In the moment, that scene, at least in the flow of the movie, actually kind of fits. Does the line still not come off that great? No, but it's not as bad as it was when it was in the preview for whatever reason. In the preview, it seemed worse, but in the movie, it flowed right along. And I think it's because the action was good enough that it just kind of, you got over it pretty quickly because there was explosions.
I think it was the cuts that they did in the previews where it's like they fly now, they fly now, like that sort of stuff.
I think you're right. All right. So
one last thing on C-3PO, he would have been better if his relationships with the characters felt more organic, but they didn't. Like when he said, "I'm taking one last look at my friends," like I can't think of a time when C-3PO spoke to Finn or Rey. I mean, Rey maybe, but not Finn, like or Poe. Like I mean, it just didn't feel earned. Like, like, like that moment when he said, "I'm taking one last look, sir, at my friends," was supposed to be all touching, but I didn't care because he had no on-screen. He had very little on-screen on time with the main cast of the trilogy.
Yeah, one of the YouTube channels did a really funny joke where they showed C-3PO's hand holding a little hologram of Luke, Han, and Leia.
Yeah.
That's what he was taking a look at. So anyway, moving on. So I guess I should have lumped these all together in terms of classic characters used well. But the next two things that I liked, I thought that Lando was used well. And I thought that the inclusion of Admiral Akbar's son as a member of the Resistance, and as specifically I believe he was piloting a B-Wing during the Battle of Exegol. Poe refers to him as Junior as he's walking away from Rey following their argument when he shows back up from the intelligence run and the Millennium Falcon is on fire. When he disengages from conversation with Rey and is starting to walk off screen, the Mon Calamari, he yells to, "Hey, Junior, pull up the schematics," or something. He says something Star Wars technical related to him. The Junior that he's speaking to is Admiral Akbar's son, who was brought into the movie specifically because JJ had quite a few things on a checklist that he had to make sure he fit into the Rise of Skywalker in order to appropriately whitewash the sins of The Last Jedi, which is something that, if you like the sequel trilogy on any level, but you weren't so keen on some of the things that happened in The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker does a pretty good job of fixing those problems, if that's how you perceive the movies to be. If you're a fan of The Last Jedi, you're probably still pretty angry, but I don't care.
I mean, you got your freaking Kylo Ren and Rey kiss. So what are they complaining about?
Indeed, they did. Yeah. So Lando is used well. The only thing that I have an issue with, and I do bring it up in my dislikes, but I'll bring it up now just to preface, is the only reason that he's on Pisana is because he stayed there after the trail went cold. So Luke left, but Lando just stayed there. Seems a little silly, except for plot.
I feel like I gotta say this just because I get that there is this desire to see everyone one last time, but having Lando felt like such an absolute cheap, like, yeah, we gotta throw him a bone. Who do we have left? Yeah, oh yeah, Lando. The guy that we've given no real credence to except for right now. There was never really any mention of him. It felt cheap to me, and I'm not trying to be negative, but a better way, I think, maybe like after the credits roll, pan off to a planet and he's playing cards with some like space scoundrels somewhere, and he's just chilling out. I didn't need for him to be an integral part of the whole operation, is what I'm saying.
On a serious problem with these movies. I remember I was seeing it opening night. Kev was there, and the only time the audience ever clapped was when they showed when they showed a classic character. When Lando appeared, everyone clapped. When Harrison Ford's Han Solo appeared and Kylo Ren's inner turmoil thing, everyone clapped.
When Wedge appeared,
everyone clapped.
I almost cried when Wedge showed up.
Nobody gives.
That's fine.
But that just shows how poorly constructed the main characters of this trilogy are. Nobody cares about that. The biggest highlight for everyone in the theater when I saw it were the cameos of all the OT characters.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing happened in my theater.
Yeah, and I mean, and like I was always kind of like getting ashamed in the theater because they were like clapping on because they were like almost clapping on signal, like, "Oh my god, Han Solo!"
Yeah, it is a little scary sometimes when you're out in the general public and those types of things happen.
And stuff because I knew what they were doing. I just rolled my eyes like, this isn't a movie.
But again, you do have to consider that the casual fan is my age, saw the movie a couple of times when they were a kid, liked it. You know, the same way that I like E.T. I think I saw E.T. like 3 times when I was a kid. And and when people say like, "Oh yeah, have you ever seen E.T.?" Sure I have. "Oh, did you like it?" "Oh yeah, sure." I don't remember anything about it. The only thing I remember about E.T. was the scene when they were walking around on Halloween and E.T. recognizes the kid in the Yoda costume, which then gets paid off in the Phantom Menace because you find out that the ET species is a member of the Galactic Senate, and that's why they recognize each other as a species. And then, what's the other thing? Oh, the kid Elliot has Star Wars toys on his shelf.
Yeah.
Those are the things I remember. I remember things about Star Wars.
You don't care about the movie, but then you see that the kid's got Star Wars toys in his room, and you just go, "This guy fucks."
Yeah, right. No, I actually just liked Back to the Future for what it was. I also like Huey Lewis in the News a lot. So anyway, with that being said, we don't want to get too off track. And I think that with what Jeff just said, it's apropos that in my notes, the next thing in here is that despite the fact that people were clapping on cue for classic characters, I think that The Rise of Skywalker does a fair job of bringing together what should have been the big 3 for all 3 movies, and gives them a pretty fun story. Now, you can dump on the whole idea of McMuffin chase, but it's done where it moves the story along.
They had to manufacture a relationship for Poe and Rey because they didn't talk at all about the first 2 movies.
Yeah, well, it's another thing where their relationship in the intervening time, they could have done a better job explaining why Poe and Rey bicker. But I think they also tried to just show the passage of time by showing them having a friend level argument where like they can bicker but then go back to what they were doing 2 minutes later to like indicate that they're friends and have spent time together. So like I get what he was going for. It's just a shame that, because I remember specifically during the episode 7 breakdown where Kevin brought up the fact that if Poe had been used differently, and if Poe had been the pilot of the Millennium Falcon during the escape from Jakku, you brought that up, or Kevin brought up BB-8 being able to fly the Falcon. Let's just say that Poe and Finn hadn't been separated, and that the big 3 were together from the moment they crashed on Jakku, and ever since then they've been getting into misadventures together. The big 3, the big 3, the big 3. That would have been a really nice thing to have coming into episode 9, because the very first time that we see them all interact, they come off as if they've had several adventures since The Last Jedi and have now developed a rapport.
So here's my thing, right? And this is where I'm going to get into the prequel defense mode, because J.J. Abrams openly said he doesn't like the prequels. I mean, the first line of Force Awakens, I said it before, is this will begin to...
So, it was very blatant.
So, I'm sure one of J.J. Abrams' big whines about the prequels is when Obi-Wan and Anakin are reintroduced in Episode 2, and they're just talking about all the adventures they've had over the past 10 years. They're like, you that Headmaster, and I saved you. Remember? Oh yes, I'm sure he hates that just for its expository nature. And if JJ doesn't hate it, there are tons of people haters that do. However, that sin, that sin. That trope that they all criticized is seen here between Rey and Poe, but it's way worse.
And you know what's funny about that is that Lucas even went so far as to use a callback of a creature from the original trilogy. He used the term Gundark.
Yeah.
Gundark was used by Han Solo specifically when he came in contact with Luke after his time in the bacta tank, and he said, "You look strong enough to pull the ears off of Gundark."
Yeah.
So it's not like Lucas pulled a silly name out of thin air, so it took you further away from what he was trying to convey to you. He used an original trilogy monster name, and he put it in the form of a comment to develop some history between these two, and I thought it was done well.
Also, it's worth noting that Obi-Wan interacted throughout episode 1. They didn't just meet at the very end, and then all of a sudden they're buddies in episode 2.
There's a lot of subtlety that if you allow yourself the time to watch the prequels anywhere near as many times as you, and I'm speaking to you out there in podcast land, have probably casually watched the original trilogy, you would pick up as many details about the prequels as you have over the years about the original trilogy. As I sit here watching Return of the Jedi in what they claim is 4K, but if you watch Michael from Retro Blasting, he explained that it's impossible. But you're watching a very high quality version of Return of the Jedi on Disney Plus. And just the quality of the picture and the fact that the volume isn't on, which allows me to watch the movie in a completely different way with the subtitles, because for some reason when the sound and the music is going on, it's, at least maybe the way my brain works, it's different the way it picks up details. I'm noticing little things just as I watch it now, as we're having this conversation. And that's the fun of watching a Star Wars movie, is that the detail is so rich that if you allowed yourself to watch the prequels again with different eyes, you're older now, you've lived through the sequel trilogy, go back and give the prequel trilogy a try again. And I bet you that your new eyes will allow you to really enjoy and absorb the story the way that maybe George was hoping you would after 20 years, the same way that he told Ahmed Best that it would be a while before before he really understood what it was all going to be about. And he was right. 20 years down the line, Ahmed Best is now beloved by the majority of Star Wars fans. And we've all come to realize that it was actually mostly the media that made us all believe that Jar Jar was hated. But you talk to anybody who was a kid when the movie came out.
I was 9. I thought Jar Jar was funny.
Everybody thought Jar Jar was funny that was 9 when they saw that movie.
Also,
Jeff, my brother, anybody I've ever spoken to that were kids when the prequels came out, loved Jar Jar, thought the pod race was amazing, and thought Darth Maul was the best.
I love him even more now. Like, once the Jar Jar Black series comes out, I might have Martin customize it so like a Sith Lord, give it a red lightsaber, which is cool.
Yeah, I might buy 2 and have him do the same thing, and then I could have
Regular Jar Jar.
a normal one and a Sith Jar Jar. So, I think that the level of detail and the level of just George and his people included in the prequels that are just little tiny ties to the original trilogy, just little subtle things, are all over the place. And you just have to watch the movies and just let it wash over you the way that you used to allow the original trilogy to. And you'll see more and you'll appreciate it more. And then you'll also realize that the same way that those little connections are so beautiful in the prequel and the original trilogy, how oddly clunky and heavy-handed those same callbacks can be in the sequel trilogy. And the reason why a lot of the YouTube personalities that I've been watching recently have started to push back on the entire idea of fan service. Like, what is fan service? Should it even be called that? What does fan service even mean? Was it fan service when George did it in the prequels? It's all
No, it's not. Like,
I actually think I have an answer for that.
okay.
It's Lando. Like every other character, I think you can make some basic reasoning for why they would show up when they did. You know, Han, Luke, Leia. Lando comes out of no. It's so inorganic the way he's just dropped in at the end. It's almost like they're running down a checklist. And they want you to like what's on screen, so they're showing you Lando, and that's fucking it. And you can see from the justification you even gave, the only reason he is there at that moment would be if he just stayed there for like years after Luke left, and Lando Calrissian, the most sociable, charismatic, wayfaring dude ever, is gonna park his ass on an isle on a desert planet that only gets hopping once every 50 some odd years.
42.
Only 42, yeah, and that's another dumb thing. Like,
yeah, it's really
like yeah, if something makes me more annoyed, the more I think about it, and it initially makes me happy just because I'm seeing familiarity, I think that's fan service. And I'm not saying, I think people like to use that term for things that don't necessarily apply to it, but yeah, Lando shouldn't have been there, and he was. So I think that's fan service, if that makes any sense.
Like,
No, it does.
The only time it felt more shoehorned was when Han Solo magically appeared in The Force Awakens. Like, how the hell could he have tracked the Millennium Falcon that damn quick?
Yeah. And then also something that I noticed is when they escaped the planet, where did Kylo Ren's Star Destroyer go?
Yeah.
Like, was it on the other side of the planet?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a little silly. So, okay, so moving on. Big three. I like light speed skipping on a visual level.
It's cool.
Like when I first saw it, it was cool. I really liked it. But the more you watch it, the more you realize that it completely shatters canon, because they take the concept of what Han Solo did in canon time a year prior, when he came out of light speed under the shield generator of Starkiller Base, and literally so close to the planet that if he had turned off light speed just a tenth of a second too late, he would have just slammed into the planet. And they took that concept and just, I don't even know what level of hyperbole I should use, but they amplified what Han Solo did in The Force Awakens by several fold, and introduced the concept of light speed skipping, which in actuality was just meant to technically somehow retroactively correct the light speed tracking that Rian Johnson introduced in The Last Jedi. And for as good as it looked, and I'm saying it's on my like list, it looked really cool, especially when you saw that, like, you know, there were TIE fighters that, as every single time he did it, he was able to shake like a couple more. And then the very last jump, when he was like, last jump, maybe the last one ever, and the two TIE fighters slam into like that space worm as they shoot by into hyperspace. That whole opening sequence was dope. The only problem is that it makes functionally almost no sense, because the Millennium Falcon supposedly has all kinds of mechanical problems, on top of the fact that it's only been about a year since the Battle of Starkiller Base and the Battle of Crate, because they happened within 48 hours of each other. And a year later, and who knows how many adventures since then, they are now able to take what Han did and do it seemingly on a whim, just to shake off some TIE fighters who are now capable of tracking them through light speed.
So I like the idea, and I don't like it, and I think we're reaching to a big problem with these movies. The Disney trilogy, well, okay, not so much the trilogy as a whole. This movie, Abrams takes effectively the same approach to writing this movie as people who write anime do to physics. Does it look cool? Yes. Does it make any sense? Hell the fuck no. Like, there are so many fights if you watch a classic anime show that look cool, but in the world of like actual applied physics, make no goddamn sense.
Right. And once again, we understand, Kevin, Jeff, and I understand that Star Wars is a space fantasy movie.
Yeah, it's got to look cool.
And that it doesn't have the same type of metrics and science associated with it as, say, a Star Trek or a Babylon 5 or one of those more science fiction-based shows
but
might
there's
have.
Still loose rules, and one of
but there's still rules to Star Wars.
Yes, and one of the rules with hyperspace is that it's not teleporting.
Right.
And that said, I like how they do it with Poe because they establish that Poe is a good pilot. That because it continues with the established narrative that Poe is a very, very good pilot. That said, I don't like it for the reasons I just said. That just makes no goddamn sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think my only problem, really, I think I'm pretty much of the opinion that Ed is. My only real problem with the scene outside of those issues are thematically it fails at the beginning of the movie. I think it is placed poorly. I think that scene should exist at a time where I'm more willing to believe that there's any sort of real threat to the characters. Because otherwise it's just a flashy escape route, which, I mean, that it's fine if that's what it is, but I think play up the danger a little bit. Play up the fact that this is not good, and I feel like having them suffer a little bit for having done the maneuver. Like, maybe the Falcon gets bifurcated. Like, it's like we see the Falcon, and it'd be tough to see, but we see the Falcon, like they warp one last time, and they warp in the middle of they warp to a planet where there's just a bunch of superheated string things all over the place, and they run right through one, and the Falcon is completely cut in half. Insert we're still flying half of a ship memes here, if you would.
Okay.
Yeah, but like they talk about this being a real dangerous thing, and yeah, this happens before in Star Wars, and their only suffering point is that when they get to their home base, the Falcon is a little bit on fire, and people are momentarily annoyed.
I think we touched upon another big issue with these movies. If you can summarize a movie and the transitional words are "and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened," you've got a shitty story.
And
that's
Dan,
what the Rise of Skywalker felt like. This happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. However, if you said this happened, but then this happened,
because this happened.
Yeah, because this happened. Therefore, then you have a good story.
Yeah, sort of like Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
which is what we're watching.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
so
I'm just trying to like.
Okay, so moving on. Things I liked. The first hard retcon in the Rise of Skywalker that we see is Rey is now training. We see her floating in the woods of Agent Kloss with rocks all around her, which, if you know anything about what JJ had planned for the original closing sequence of Episode 7, he planned on Daisy Ridley arriving at Ahch-To and finding Luke in his ceremonial Jedi robes, and he was going to be floating cross-legged, basically the same way that we find Daisy Ridley's character at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker, but on Ahch-To and with a bunch of, like bigger rocks, basically.
So I liked it that she was training, but I didn't like it because Luke, into his first year of Jedi training, couldn't even lift his X-wing out of the water, or couldn't even pick up a stack of rocks. And you're telling me that fucking Rey can sit cross-legged, waffling in midair, and just have a bunch of rocks circling around her like a fucking fucking Adam. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, they're definitely continuing with the bestest ever thing, but at least JJ made an attempt, and we'll also point out at the same time that Leia is now her Jedi Master, and that obviously took quite a bit of work on the part of the Lucasfilm team because they were working with found footage from Episode 7 that had to be repurposed, which on one hand did not do so well, if you look at it with too critical an eye. But when you recognize that it was the best they had to work with, otherwise they would have had to find a way to. I mean, I guess a lot of people say that they should have started the movie with some sort of a funeral sequence for Leia. I don't know how well that would have played for a Star Wars movie. And again, I'm on the like part of my criticism right now. I like that JJ made an attempt at showing Rey training. I like that JJ made an attempt at connecting Leia and Luke, continuing the story of Leia truly being the other that Yoda talked about, and attempting to retroactively fix the Leia Poppins sequence from The Last Jedi by saying that Leia did receive Jedi training and that she was able to use the Force to the point where she was capable of doing the Leia Poppins thing. And that on top of that, if you are willing and you read the supplementary material of the Journey to the Rise of Skywalker, books that Leia was very physically debilitated by her effort to get back onto the Raddus when she was blown out into space, and that she knew for all intents and purposes that she had, depleted herself to a degree that, she had taken several years off her life due to that effort. And she could see the writing on the wall.
Took several years off mine too.
They were able to make lemonade out of lemons, at least in my estimation, to a large degree, out of that found footage, and be able to do it in a way where Rey now looks like there is something to be said for her ability in the remainder of the movie. Okay, so moving on. I like that the Resistance base and the Tantive 4 are in it's a rehash of Yavin, but Agent Kloss is a jungle planet. In the shot when the Falcon with the big three takes off for the beginning of their mission, and you see the back of the Tantive 4 just sticking out of the cave that the Resistance is hiding in. I think that scene, that shot is really cool. I think that the Tantive 4 being, built and in scale with the actors and having it as the backdrop of the Resistance base for the majority of the movie was really well done.
It looks like an action figure setup.
It absolutely does. That's why I like it. And that's exactly why J.J. Abrams did it, because we've discussed this in previous episodes. J.J. loves to have that sense of scale.
Yeah.
And he loves nothing more in a movie like Star Wars than to have your favorite thing, like an X-Wing, sitting in a little open area in the jungle so that it looks awesome on that vintage collection box with your Poe Dameron figure and your Chewie figure and your C-3PO and your R2. And hopefully Hasbro puts out the appropriate costume Rise of Skywalker, Finn, and Poe Dameron figures, but they'll get around to it.
They can go on wild McMuffin chases.
Yeah, I mean, you can't expect me to play with my action figures and have to use a Last Jedi Finn to go on a wild McMuffin chase. It's going to break my suspension of disbelief when I'm playing with my action figures.
We need to take a pause from this scene real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see you, but I can't see you because you're not using face cam this time, but I can just imagine you going, if something happens that breaks my suspension of disbelief when I'm playing with my action figures, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to take it out on a lot of people. No one says those words like a serial killer. They say them like with like man-child like gusto. Like, man, if anything breaks my suspension of disbelief, the way you say that line is so chilling. It actually, like, I've known you for a decade, and it struck fear into the deepest part of my heart.
Yeah, you see how strongly I feel about my action figure time.
Was it the running
It's just like it's just like, listen, I am in my day job, I am a trained killer. I'm confident that I could submit larger, more physically superior men in unarmed combat, and I would break them before me. And I am calm and collected. But if anything got in the way of me having a fulfilling time playing with my action figures, the terror that I would unleash.
Yeah, you gotta have accurate action figures if you're gonna play out your wild McMuffin chases.
I feel really happy right now.
Okay. Next thing I like. We haven't mentioned much of the First Order yet. I think that General Pride is awesome. I think
yeah.
Well used.
It was them trying to correct. It was them bringing in a new Hux because Ryan Johnson crapped on the old Hux.
Yes, Hux 2 Electric Boogaloo. He did a great job as General Pride. Thought General Pride was just terrific.
Yeah, that was okay. I have no problem. Like when I was in that theater looking for things to crap on, and believe me, Pride was not among the things I was crapping on.
That's fair. Okay. So next thing that I like that in this movie anyway, that the expository dialogue is used well enough to move the plot along, considering that the movie is, for all intents and purposes, a wild McMuffin chase. I mean, I pretty much said the way I feel in that note. I think that the expository dialogue, when you watch the movie a few times, which I've seen, I think I've watched the movie 6 times now, the movie gets easier to follow every time. Most of that is due to the fact that I'm just watching the movie. I'm not shuffling around my apartment. I'm not looking at Instagram at the same time. I'm not doing, computer work kind of thing. I'm watching the movie. And when you do that, the movie does smooth out and slow down a little bit to a degree. And when you realize that some of the things you didn't quite understand the first time have their answers right in the movie, it's just that everything moves so fast that you miss it.
Sorry, I'm watching Return of the Jedi, where Yoda confirms that Vader was Luke's father, is one of the best scenes in all of
Which is interesting because George Lucas wasn't going to add that scene, but after consulting a handful of child psychology experts and asking whether or not that scene would help to solidify in the minds of children that Darth Vader was not lying to Luke, and they said that he should do that, that's when he included this scene.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I just fucking love that scene.
It's just interesting you brought it up because that is something I remember very distinctly about it, is that Lucas was going back and forth with Richard Marquand about whether or not they should include it. And when they consulted some child psychologist, they were like, well, word on the street is the kids think Vader was lying. He is a bad guy. So that's why they did that. So anyway, next thing that I like that the furthering of the Reylo force bond was used to solidify the special nature of their relationship. specifically the Force dyad. Now, I've read some things just today that make me like the idea of the Force dyad less, but when I initially heard about it, my knee-jerk reaction was to think of the way that it was used previously in Star Wars, which is in the expanded universe between the connection of the Jedi Revan and Bastila Shan. So knowing that the Force dyad was technically a thing in Star Wars, and that it was a thing between two very powerful Jedi in the Old Republic era, I was like, oh, that's a cool thing.
But see, there's a reason for that. Like, the reason why Bastila had a Force dyad with Revan was because she and her Jedi strike team cornered Revan on a ship when he was still a Sith Lord. Malik fired on Revan's ship, which injured Revan to an inch of his life, and then Bastila used the Force to preserve Revan, and that's how the bond was established.
So she used Force heal,
or she could have used that fucking forehead touch thing that she and Obi-Wan do.
Which is now what a lot of canon heads are saying is the first retroactive use of Force heal. So it really, that's one of those things that I think is more of a headcanon thing that most fans like to think of if they want to try and smooth out some of the bumps in what they perceive as the narrative.
Well, that's the thing. Force healing works in video games, but some things work in video games and some things work in movies. Like, the character of Revan works in a video game, but that idea is very hard to pull off in a movie just because he's basically your avatar in the Star Wars universe. You choose his actions, you choose his face, you choose pretty much everything about him. So you can have him be an evil bastard throughout the whole movie, or you can have him be totally incorruptible throughout the whole movie. That makes for bad storytelling in movies, and with Rey, she's all powerful and she's totally incorruptible. Anyway, sorry.
I would just say that I think that if more attention had been given to, like, Rey is shown to be very, powerful in the Force. I don't know if it's because of her connection to Kylo, but we never get that same feeling from Kylo until the end when he is able to Force heal Rey.
Sorry. So before I went off onto that tangent, there's really no origin given to the Force dyad. There's no okay, this is when it was established. I guess you can assume it was established when Kylo Ren was interrogating Rey in the Dark base. I guess maybe, but
So if you were going to go that far as to try and give some level of credence to what was going on, and at the same time even give Rian Johnson a little bit of credit, you could say that the initial connection was created during the interrogation scene, because if you read the book, you also find out that that's where the Force downloads. So when the door opened between their two minds, things were able to flow back and forth. So in that regard, you could say that the gate was opened by Kylo for all intents and purposes. You find out in The Last Jedi that the connection that's created that initially Kylo assumes would be too difficult for Rey to do, the effort would kill you, which was technically foreshadowing for Luke later on in the movie. He perceived that Rey somehow was able to project herself, and then he corrected himself. Then he was unsure of what was creating their connection, which we find out later in the movie was created by Snoke. However, there's now a hiccup in the story because there's quite a bit of missing information as to how Snoke was able to do anything if he was in fact a puppet of Palpatine. but we'll just go ahead and skip that for now because we're still on the things that I like list. So I do like the Force Dyad. I do like the way that the Force Dyad developed over the course of the 3 movies, even if over the course of the 3 movies it was literally a happy accident.
Sorry about that, folks.
That's okay.
The idea of a Force Dyad, I don't hate, but like they could just, I mean, as much as this is kind of contradictory to what I said about how Dark Revan wouldn't necessarily work as a movie character, why not just do a Revan and Bastila movie? I mean, granted, it is somewhat contradictory, but they could massage him into a good film character. They would do some work, and KOTOR fans would need to reconcile the fact that this character they're seeing may not be the Revan that they played as during the game.
Well, why don't they? Do you think a guy like a Drew Karpyshyn would be capable of that, or does he have to stay in his lane and just stay in the novel industry?
Dude, the Darth Vader trilogy is some of the best Star Wars ever written.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like a guy like Drew Karpyshyn would be the guy who knows that era well enough where he would be capable of writing a definitive Revan story that the majority of Old Republic fans could get behind.
Yeah, I agree.
This is a little off topic for Revan, but with regards to the Force Dyad, I always felt like something more akin to going back to some sort of symbolism or mythology related to the children might have worked better. I always kind of thought that's where they were going to go eventually. Like, both the children, like the Mortis.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, like because both the children are dead, and so is the father. Maybe they're reincarnations of the children or something.
Yeah, I mean, there was speculation that the reason why Matt Smith was originally in the cast of the Rise of Skywalker and then was removed was, if you look at Matt Smith, there's some photoshops that people have put up online. Matt Smith looks as much like the son from Mortis when he's wearing the makeup or when he's photoshopped to have the makeup on as any human could possibly.
Then again, I will interject. The Thrawn in that Timothy Zahn book, the picture of the side picture of Thrawn in that Timothy Zahn book, looks a hell of a lot like Benicio del Toro with blue makeup on.
Which is exactly what I said when we were talking about speculation for episode 8. Remember?
Yeah. We were sure. Like we were.
I was positive that Thrawn was going to get reintroduced, and that he was going to be part of the upper echelon of the First Order, and that he was going to be in charge of some special fleet, etc., etc. I was all ready for Thrawn. Instead, we got Benicio del Toro stuttering and picking locks. And,
he's such a good actor too. Like they wasted him so much.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
He'd be such a good Thrawn. Like he would be an epic. Like if
he would have been a great Thrawn. So anyway, moving on. Next thing that I liked the return of the OT ships. I liked them specifically in the scene when they're leaving for the Battle of Exegol, and they're all rising up out of the forest. And they're flying towards Exegol. The way that the Y-Wing is designed is very reminiscent of the way that Ralph McQuarrie originally drew them. And then Y-Wings, A-Wings, B-Wings, all back in action. My heart was just filled. I felt like a kid again. That scene in particular was an excellent callback to the original. Actually, no, it looked more like the special edition version of the X and Y wings leaving Yavin on the approach to the first Death Star. And I just like the way that the music and the shot combined, and I was just happy to see Y-Wings again. So that made me happy.
I was personally, I felt I felt let down that we didn't see any more bombers like from episode 8. I felt like where were they?
Oh god.
No, they all blew up, pal.
Yeah.
Oh, that was it. That was all. They all.
Well, actually, no. There actually are a couple in the scene when the entire galaxy fleet shows up.
Evers in that fucking scene.
Yeah, but specifically, I've watched a couple of YouTube videos where they do breakdowns and they point out that there are at least 2 or 3 of them in the mix.
Like, wasn't there a Clone Wars fucking flagship in that? Like.
Yeah, I think there was even a Venator in there somewhere.
Where the hell
There's a
did that
loophole.
come from?
Exactly.
Who knows?
It's a dumb scene. I don't care what anyone says. It's fucking stupid.
Yeah, I want to know who's going to the Lucra Hull.
I would love it. I would love if the Venator is just piloted by the one remaining tactical droid from the Clone Wars.
No, that would be the Lucra Hull. The Venator would be like the one last clone who like got lost on his last mission and just showed back up.
The guy from Echo Squad that you think dies in their first episode by blowing up the
right at the end. And shoots her in the head,
or just deviates from the fleet and just Order 66 himself right into the temple. Anyway,
he's been looking for a Jedi and he can't find him.
Moving on.
Man.
I think that in this movie, Snap Wexley is funny, and that connected to that, in general, the classic Star Wars humor that I appreciate is back. I find it to be a terrible shame that Snap Wexley's scene that was cut from The Force Awakens was cut for 2 reasons. One, I like the character of Snap Wexley because if you did, in fact, wade through the Aftermath series, the second and third book of the Aftermath series are written far better than the first one. And the stories also improve quite a bit. And Snap Wexley is a key character in those books. And I enjoyed his character arc in the books. I enjoyed the character that is his droid partner in crime throughout the books, Mr. Bones, who's a reprogrammed B1 battle droid. So if you do choose to read the Aftermath books, Snap and Mr. Bones are particularly cool. For those of you who don't know, Greg Grunberg played Snap Wexley. Greg Grunberg has been friends with J.J. Abrams since they were in kindergarten and have been friends since then. J.J. promised Greg that he would be in his movies. He obviously used him in episode 7. His initial scene was cut. Was requesting that Corsella, her assistant, go to Hosnian Prime and beg the Senate to reconsider helping the Resistance because the threat of the First Order was real and that hopefully they'll listen. Obviously, you find out that they don't listen, at least not in time, and that Starkiller Base blows them up with Corsella being the girl that runs to the balcony and looks horrified, but you don't know who she is, so you don't care. Well, Corsella and Greg Grunberg's Snap Wexley character are all in that scene, so you get to spend a little more time with him. You get to establish that he's one of the Resistance pilots, and you also learn quite a bit more about him in the Poe Dameron comics. So as a character, I like Snap. I particularly like the scene in The Rise of Skywalker where he has to interact with the found footage of Leia. And I think of all the found footage of Leia, including the dialogue segments between Leia and Rey, the best use of Leia's repurposed footage was her scene with Greg Grunberg assuring her that the mission was going to be a success when she asks him to be more positive. And he hams up how positive he's being, and it annoys Rose, and she turns and walks away in disgust because she thinks that he's being an idiot. And it just plays really funny. It's just a funny Star Wars bit. And then on top of that, it's with the repurposed Leia footage, which I which I just thought was used really well.
It was phenomenal comedic timing for the movie.
I love but there were some parts with Leia footage where Ray asked some like very like intricate question, and Leia was like, "Yes." I was like, "What?" I was just like, "This is weird."
If you get around to watching it again, you'll realize that doesn't happen that many times. But yeah, you do have to. You have to make some concessions with the Leia footage in order to follow the movie. Obviously we know that she passed away right after she filmed The Last Jedi, and that perhaps it would have been easier to start the movie with a funeral scene, or to even include that Leia, had passed away in between the events of 8 and 9 and put it in the crawl. Who knows? But she was in the movie, and I think that in particular, the scene when Greg Grunberg and she are interacting, that it is funny. I think it's well used in terms of the repurposed material, and it makes me sad that the scene that he was in episode 7 wasn't included, not only for the narrative's sake, but also because I like Greg Grunberg, I like the Snap Wexley character. It makes it even more of a shame that he wasn't included in episode 8 simply because Rian Johnson didn't hire him. You have to assume that in the narrative that he was on a mission somewhere with Black
budget though. Why do something under budget when hired?
He was on a mission with Black Squadron, Jeff. So anyway, next thing that I like.
Thank you, Rian Johnson.
Yeah, right. So anyway, the next thing that I liked that Jannah and her squad mates were living off the land on Kef Bir, which is the ocean moon of Endor, after defecting from the First Order. Now, in a previous episode, I had mentioned that the reason they had defected was because of FN 2187. That's not accurate. They simply took it upon themselves as an entire company of stormtroopers during a battle to not fire upon unarmed townspeople, very much like the scene in the beginning of The Force Awakens, except instead of simply Finn not firing, the entire company laid down their arms. And we find this out during one of the few moments where things slow down while Jannah and Finn are working on the Falcon. Jannah hands Finn a part. It's a shiny part, which then prompts the conversation to turn towards where she got it. You find out that she was a member of the First Order, and that they had defected and commandeered their dropship, landed on Kef Bir, and were now living off the land because they refused to fight for the First Order. I thought that was a particularly cool way to make. Well, I thought it was a cool way to include a new character. I thought that Jannah as a character was just neat. I liked the costume they gave her.
It was a good attempt to try and salvage Finn's arc somewhat. Like they really tried to salvage Finn's arc. So, like they really did try. It just didn't work.
They did. Yeah, JJ tried his best. There's a lot of situations in the Rise of Skywalker where you can tell JJ really did try. And in this particular instance, I thought that it did give Finn's character a little more depth, and it gave him something to do because now he had another person in the story who understood him. And if you want to go in the direction where we talk about race in that regard, it is good to see two people of color in a role where they're on the screen together alone. And we're just like, hey, we're watching Star Wars and nobody's saying anything about it. In that case, that's wonderful. But for me, the more important thing is that I do like the idea that there are more than just Finn in terms of these horrible kidnapped child soldiers where the programming doesn't work. And no matter how hard you try, you kidnap a kid at 2-3 years old and you raise them to just to be this brainwashed soldier for you. There's a certain level of humanity that you just simply can't program out of a person. And I thought that it was a nice way to highlight that by showing that this company of stormtroopers had just decided to crash land on Endor and just live out their days on Endor rather than be a part of the First Order. Again, a bit of a plot contrivance to just have them sitting there waiting in order to give them parts for the Falcon and provide Rey with a water skimmer to get out to the gigantic hunk of the Death Star that crashed. But hey, it is what it is.
That's the thing. If Abrams is such a big Star Wars fan, wouldn't he have seen Obi-Wan's line in A New Hope saying, in my experience, there is no such thing as luck?
Well, yeah, but we don't all remember every line of dialogue with photographic memory like others do. I know quite a bit about Star Wars, but I might lose a trivia contest to say Alex Damon from Star Wars Explained. Does that mean he's a bigger or a better Star Wars fan than me? No. So in that regard, does a person who claims to be a Star Wars fan, JJ included, mean that they have to know every piece of dialogue? No. Is that particular piece of dialogue very important and kind of, even like casual fans remember it?
Yes.
Yes. In that regard, should he remember that line? Yes. Does he have to still be a fan? No, he does not. So we'll work under the assumption that maybe he forgot that day. Next thing that I like. The revealing of Palpatine as Rey's grandpa works. Creamy Sheev Palpatine. Now, in parentheses, I put without Palpatine needing to be present, and I still stand by that. We haven't gotten to my do not likes yet, but
it's probably pretty short.
although I like that Rey is a Palpatine, although I don't like how much it retroactively corrects the overpowered aspect of her use of the Force and things of that nature, it does lend some credence to why her identity was such a MacGuffin in The Force Awakens. How they try to repair what happens in The Last Jedi, I don't know. I mean, we've been over the idea of Rey being from nowhere, not necessarily being as important as some people chalk it up to be, because all of the Jedi of the prequel trilogy are effectively from nowhere. We use the example that upon being questioned, George Lucas was asked what planet Obi-Wan Kenobi is from, and at a knee-jerk reaction, he said Stew John, because he was asked by Jon Stewart.
Yeah.
So there's clearly some stuff where we're not paying attention and where technically it really doesn't matter where Obi-Wan's from.
Yeah.
Because where we pick him up in the story is what really matters.
Yeah.
So does it really matter if we know Rey's lineage? No. Does the fact that Rey is extremely overpowered lead us to believe that maybe there is something special about her lineage? And the fact that people keep asking about her through The Force Awakens makes us believe that even more so? Yes. The fact that we find out that she's no one in The Last Jedi is surprising. And then the twist of her technically being no one from a certain point of view because her parents chose to be no one because they wanted to get away from the legacy of Palpatine. I can accept it, but that's on the condition that Rey finds this out in a universe where Palpatine truly is dead, and that there's some other way to wrap up the story that doesn't involve her having to go to a mystery planet and kill her grandfather with his Force lightning.
So check it out. I fixed this in my treatment of. I know this isn't what we've done different, but I fixed this in my treatment of the Star Wars sequel movies.
Mm-hmm.
Rey is still Palpatine's granddaughter. However, she was born during the OT, and she sees and her parents still get killed, not by some random space marshmallow that's orange, but by Darth Vader. So she sees Darth Vader axe her parents, and then fast forward to, I think it was episode 8. She is confronted by Anakin Skywalker. He throws a shit fit and falls to the dark side. Therefore, the continuation of the Sith is still contingent on Anakin Skywalker's story and his fall and his time as Darth Vader. Therefore, his redemption isn't complete until Rey is either destroyed or turned back to the light.
Well, it's unfortunate that no one from Lucasfilm contacted you prior to the movies being made, because I think I would have liked to have seen your treatment. Speaking of which, this is a slight tangent, but I think it's important. For those of you who do watch YouTube, there's a channel called Mr. Sunday Movies, and they're obviously very well versed in Star Wars, and they've been known to do in the past what looks like 16 or 32-bit versions of certain scenes from the Star Wars movies. Well, they took it a step further this time, and they got in contact with somebody who does 3D animation, and they did a 10-minute condensed version in 3D animation of the Colin Trevorrow version of Episode 9, based on what we've learned from things that have been leaked on the internet. It was just released today, and it is wild. It's one of the best pieces of material that Mr. Sunday Movies has ever put out, and they're one of the most entertaining YouTube channels I've ever seen. And not that I want to talk about the Duel of the Fates script in particular right now, but considering that Jeff obviously had a very different vision for these three movies, I think it should be at least noted that we have found out in the last couple of months that the script that was rejected ultimately by Kathleen Kennedy, that was written by Colin Trevorrow, would have taken the story in a very unique and I think would have been very fulfilling way.
That scene, that piece of concept art where Hux is committing seppuku with the fucking ships in the background is awesome.
Yeah, there is some art that aligns with the Colin Trevorrow script that was released that is just terrific. So it's a shame, even though there were certain aspects of his script that were still technically in the Rise of Skywalker.
Is he still credited?
He is still credited, because technically some of the things from his script were carried over, but not enough of it where he can be included on the actual screenplay credit. So moving on. Boogie. Babu Frick.
Come on.
Like, literally, Babu Frick. He's just great. When C-3PO comes back online and introduces himself, and there's like a pregnant pause, and then Babu goes, "Hello, I'm Babu Frick." I almost fell out of my seat. He's just wonderful.
There was a time.
Droid's brain go black.
There was a time immediately after that episode 9 came out where like everyone in the social media was trying to like supplant Baby Yoda with Babu Frick, and it failed miserably.
Yeah, that didn't work out too well, but that's okay. Babu Frick is terrific. Chewie's rescue sequence on the Star Destroyer. So, even though it technically should break my suspension of disbelief in the sequel trilogy, that I should find it unpleasant to see an untold amount of masked child soldiers being massacred on a Star Destroyer just to save Chewie. when the scene is actually happening, man, is it fun. Them running down the hallway, blasting stormtroopers, perfect aim the whole time. They don't miss a single shot. I am being a little bit glib right now, but as far as the actual action scene from the moment that they land Uchi's ship inside the Star Destroyer and they come running down the ramp just blasting, and then Rey has her mind trick moment with the two stormtroopers and the whole thing. The whole sequence when they escape Kijimi and then land on Kylo's Star Destroyer while he's still down on Kijimi to rescue Chewie and then to escape. I thought that whole sequence was done really well, especially considering that that sequence included the Force Skype battle where Rey was in Kylo's chambers and Kylo was down on Kijimi, and Kylo didn't realize where she was until they knocked the Darth Vader helmet off its pedestal and it landed at his feet on Kijimi. And then he notifies the one soldier that she's in my quarters, lock down the ship, and then he shows back up and they have that standoff in the hangar where he tells her that she's Palpatine's granddaughter. And then they have that version of the from a certain point of view conversation between Luke and Obi-Wan's ghost, where he says that, you know, when I told you that you were no one, I was telling you the truth. They chose to be no one because they wanted to get away from Palpatine, and Palpatine wanted you for his own. And they hid you in the whole thing. And then she runs and jumps onto the Falcon, and then the Falcon throws its thrusters on, and all the stormtroopers go flying, and Kylo glues himself to the floor, and he's trying to force pull the Falcon, and it blasts off and stuff. That whole sequence was classic J.J. Abrams action. And again, if you're not worried about canon implications, it was awesome.
Okay, but that lightsaber fight, along with the one on Kefir, which is a dumb name for a planet. It sounds like a fucking name for a. It sounds like a frat house name. Kefir, bro. Woohoo! Anyway,
some names land and some don't.
All that aside, the lightsaber fights in this movie suck. It's like I remember watching it, and like every 5 seconds there was a class like boom, boom, boom. Like, are they just like slow motion whacking their sticks together?
Well, again, I think at the very least there were different fight and stunt coordinators on the sequel trilogy for, I'm sure, a variety of reasons, not the least of which was simply the passage of time meant that perhaps the previous coordinators had retired or moved on. Maybe it was just a fresh blood thing. But one of the things that you can point to in these movies is that the lightsaber fighting is obviously not as choreographed as the prequels. On one hand, because the prequels were supposed to show the Jedi at the height of their power, so their ability with the lightsabers was going to be at their zenith. The other thing is that you have Disney now in charge of lightsabers, and Disney does not want people being dismembered on screen. So
yeah, you wouldn't get Obi-Wan rolling into a bar and slicing a man's arm off in Disney stuff.
So in order to keep you from seeing that kind of thing, you're no longer having them fight with their lightsabers as if they were swords.
They're baseball bats.
They're basically swinging baseball bats at each other.
And that sucks.
Instead of swinging to kill one another, they're swinging at each other's baseball bats. So again, to point out a YouTube channel that you should check out, Shadiversity is a gentleman who I've mentioned in the past who's a medieval weapons expert, and he does breakdowns of different fights from movies, Star Wars obviously being one of his favorites. And he has a particular issue with the way that the sequel trilogy interprets lightsaber fighting, because he basically refers to it as two people swinging baseball bats at each other. So I have a hard time disagreeing because when you have watched the original trilogy lightsaber fights as many times as I have, when effectively my favorite thing about episode 1 is the very final sequence when Obi-Wan finally is able to get at Darth Maul after witnessing Qui-Gon being killed.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so excited to get back in the theater and see that movie again, just to get back to that scene. I can remember it so vividly. It's like I'm standing in the parking lot of the movie theater right now. It's 1999 again. I mean, I loved that scene. I still do. So
it's awesome.
Nothing about the new lightsaber fights has inspired me that much, outside of when Finn picked up the lightsaber to protect Rey, and when Kylo demanded that the lightsaber belongs to him, and Finn says, "Come and get it," and then he runs at him. Because of how raw and untrained Finn was with the lightsaber, and the fact that Kylo was obviously injured from the bowcaster wound. And if you know, so there's a famous quote that I'm going to butcher terribly from, I believe, Mark Twain, which is that the greatest swordsman in the world shouldn't fear the second greatest swordsman. He should fear the fool whose movements he cannot predict.
Yeah.
So I think that Finn in that case was filling the role of the fool, and as a result becomes an extremely dangerous foil for a master of lightsaber combat like Kylo Ren.
It's the same way you're rolling with this. It's the same vein as rolling with spazzy white belt.
It is like rolling with a spazzy white belt. Exactly. It even though it shouldn't be, because you're the more skilled practitioner, their randomness is what makes them dangerous.
Yeah.
So in that regard, the Finn and Kylo lightsaber fight in episode 7 is probably my favorite.
I think there's another quote that I think sort of caps on that feeling maybe just as well, and it has to do with poker, and that's I forget where I heard this, but experienced poker players need to fear two types of players: the players that have been playing for 100 years, like the crazy old guys that just have such an intimate knowledge of people that it's like it's a different game for them, and the people it's their first day. Everyone in between is malleable. Like everybody in between, you don't need to, like, you have a fair shot, but there's nothing really to read when someone A is so good that they're beyond your ability to comprehend, or B too naive to know what they should be hiding or feeling or anything like that.
Yes, that definitely fits there for sure. Okay, so moving on, because that all stemmed from me liking the rescue sequence for Chewie. The next thing that I like, and this is probably the thing that I like the most about the Rise of Skywalker, and in the same way that I like this part the most, where it literally elevates the movie beyond what it should be, is the inverse of what Luke Skywalker's character arc in The Last Jedi did for me for that movie.
You mean him catching the lightsaber, him pulling the X-Wing out of the water?
From the moment when he caught the lightsaber, moment when he lifted the X-Wing, I was so elated that I was witnessing on screen literally the exact opposite of what I witnessed in The Last Jedi. I was so thrilled on one hand, I was thrilled because my Luke Skywalker was back. Yes, he's a Force ghost, but from the moment that he grabbed that lightsaber out of midair, walked out of the flames of the TIE fighter. For everything he did, he was Luke Skywalker. And I loved it. The only thing that could have made it better is if somehow being on Octo, he was able to fully rematerialize because the Force is so strong there that being a Force ghost has different rules. And maybe everywhere else he has to be a ghost, but on Octo he can still be fully him. Whatever it was, the fact that he was there, the fact that he was Luke Skywalker again, and the fact that he did the best interpretation of the Obi-Wan Force Ghost coming back to encourage Luke to finish the job. It just filled my heart with joy.
If you told me that Mark Hamill showed up to set and they said literally just go from the heart, I'd believe it. Like he had like it felt like he had no script. He's like, finally, listen, put the script away. I got this. I've wanted to be this guy for a long time again, and now I finally get to.
So I liked it up until I like him raising the X-Men out of the water. I don't like Rey getting in it and flying it to Exegol because again, it feels like a theme park ride, and Rey is your avatar in the Star Wars universe, where you get to collect all this cool Star Wars stuff.
Oh, I mean, at the point when she's got his helmet on and she's flying the X-Wing through the space cancer to get to Exegol, I mean, if at that point you haven't figured out what's going on, you probably have a helmet on inside the theater.
Dude,
and I don't mean a stormtrooper helmet.
Dude. When that scene happened and you saw her flying through the space in Luke's X-Wing, I legit shouted. Well, I didn't shout it, but I said, get your own stuff, bitch, because she doesn't have any of her own stuff. She has Han's blaster, she has Anakin's lightsaber, she has Luke's X-Wing. Like, she doesn't have like any of her own stuff.
However, in defense of the Rise of Skywalker, at the beginning of the movie, when she has her establishing dialogue with Poe to show that they've been bickering for over a year now, the first thing she says to him is, "What did you do to Han's ship?" So that was JJ once again trying to establish that the legacy characters are being respected, even posthumously, by the current big three, because Rey does not refer to the Falcon even as just the Falcon. She refers to it as Han's ship. And then he says, "What did you do to my droid?" Because she dropped a tree on BB-8.
You want to know what I say?
What do you say?
Get your own stuff, bitch.
You're an angry man.
Anyway.
Okay, so next thing that I like the fact that Ben Solo, after his redemption fever dream with Han, comes back and helps to save the day, not by doing anything particularly Jedi-like, but by realizing that the only way to truly redeem his sins and to do right by the galaxy and by Rey, who, for all intents and purposes, we're supposed to understand that even if he doesn't outright love her, he understands that the bond between them is something that can't be ignored, although I do believe that they are, in fact, full-blown Reylo in love.
Dude,
hold on, not done. The fact that at the end of the movie, if you accept the fact that as a dyad, when she heals him, he then basically downloads her ability to do that. But in recognition of the fact that this is not healing a wound, that in order for him to transfer his life force to her, it's going to have to be so complete an effort that it kills him as a result, is probably the best way to wrap up his story arc, give him the redemption that we all know he was going to get from the beginning, even though it got a little convoluted in the middle, and gives him the closest thing to an homage to Vader that you could have asked for in the sequel trilogy.
I say copy paste.
You say copy paste, I say homage, and that's why we're all here together. Yeah. Kevin, what do you say? Do you think there's a better way they could have closed out Ben Solo's character?
I think I want it to, like, I feel like they squandered an opportunity, a perfect opportunity to have Hayden show up. Like, maybe don't have him in the final battle, I guess. Don't have him show up to help defeat Sidious and reclaim a little bit of or retain a little bit of that victory from the last time he had to kill Sidious. That just them having an honest and frank conversation would have been very refreshing. And also, that's not fan service. That is so not the opposite of fan service. It would feel appropriate. It'd be like, at this point, who's failed to talk sense into him? Both of his parents. Who has he failed to actually have a who has he thought he's been talking to this whole time? Darth Vader. Who would probably really love to get some words in edgewise with this guy? Anakin. Have him be like, maybe real quick. Maybe the way you do it is he has thoroughly cut himself off from the light side of the Force. He is immersed in darkness. He's lost. But that the act of charity of Rey giving up some of her life force for him reconnects him to the lights, or maybe it's the death of his mother that connects him to the light side, and through that avenue Anakin is able to step through and communicate with him in a way that maybe he couldn't before. There's too many ways for that to make sense, rather than his imaginary dad comes back.
You want to know why it didn't happen? Because nobody in the theater would say, "Oh my God, Anakin Skywalker!"
Okay. I think you're okay. Okay, Jeff, chill the fuck out. I think it's more to do with the fact that they wanted to reference their own mythos and their own narrative. They wanted to reference a story beat that they had trod on and no one else had. And that's with Ben and Han. I think they wanted to drive that home, and that's it. And I think that they were only willing to have Hayden show up for a VO role for 2 seconds just because people would have literally flipped the shit if he had gotten nothing. Now, I think they saw this as an opportunity. Oh, we got to bring up the prequels somehow, but we can't just do Sidious. So let's have a bunch of prequel actors show up in this scene. We're also going to have Ahsoka Tano. But that's it, and that's all we got to do because we're lazy fucking hacks and nothing really matters. I'm sorry. I know. I wish I could be on the plateau that you're on and have this movie so thoroughly kill the remaining brain cells that I actually like it. But for me, I think this movie in a lot of ways is just as egregious, if not more so, than The Last Jedi. It pisses me off to no end, and I fucking hate it, and I will never like it. It is terrible. I fucking hate it.
So consider this. What if after his conversation with Han and after Leia basically sacrifices herself to reach out to him through the Force and communicate to him that he is not fully lost, that he can come back, because that's something that he mentions to Rey during the Kijimi Force Skype, where he says to her, "You can't go back either," because of how she's acted. He thinks that he's irredeemable in her eyes, and she proves to him that he is not when she reaches out to him before she passes away. Let's say that because of that, and because of Snoke now being gone, and Palpatine having admitted that he is, in fact, the voice of Vader that Kylo had been hearing, let's say that now that Kylo knows that, he's able to have a channel and actually communicate with the Force Ghost of Anakin, which for the first time manifests because Kylo has broken free of that and is now Ben Solo, officially has chosen the light, and before he heads to Exegol, after having his Han fever dream, they fit somewhere into the story him actually for the first time interacting with an Anakin Skywalker Force ghost.
Okay, so real quick, you've given him like it's not bad, but you've had to just give him multiple like mentor one-on-ones in order to get him to Anakin. I really the problem is he should have been having these conversations the whole time, or at least like thinking about them, or we need to have been shown that they could have happened and didn't for some reason. Another interesting concept, maybe Leia has always been more realistic and prone to being jaded. Like there's that time that Vader actually visits Leia as a Force ghost and she straight up refuses to forgive him. You know, she's more realistic. So you could put, I think, had you done something like Leia shows up instead of Rey to fight Kylo at the end of Episode 7. Maybe she's like, my son is dead. Like I will now fight you as I would fight any other enemy of freedom. Like you are done. Like she's given up on him. So there doesn't need to be any sort of makeup session there. Like maybe they'll make up at the end as Force Ghosts. I don't care. There's such a fucking gobbledygook amount of nonsense that's keeping people from just talking to each other during these movies, that yet the fact that we're having to do so much patchwork to even sort of come to some sort of conclusion that makes sense and gets Kylo in a room with Anakin and they have the conversation that they should have. Do you see where my annoyance is coming from? Like you're willing to do the work, I think, because your investment is a little bigger than mine. But as a fan that's not on that level, I'm just thinking going, this is why people leave. This stupid, dumb bullshit that man,
all right,
when a few assholes can sort of hit closer, truer story beats, half angry on a podcast while the world falls apart outside their fucking doors, I think Disney needs to fire everybody. Every single soul that had a say in any of this dumb bullshit needs to go. And they never should be allowed anywhere near Star Wars again. They might be great on Frozen. Give them to Frozen 3. I'm sure some of them would be great over there. Give them a fucking Disney live action remake. They need to be quarantined from Star Wars, or Star Wars needs to be quarantined from them. Fuck.
All right, so my last two likes.
I really like the cinematography.
My last two likes. You're going to get really mad about this probably, but
Great.
I do have
I'll mute my mic.
Rey taking the Skywalker name is a fitting way to end this trilogy. Now, understanding the way that I prefaced this episode and understanding how I explain the way that I feel about the sequel trilogy. With that being said, the way that Joseph Scrimshaw explains it, and I choose to follow this explanation to keep the headaches from coming back, is that despite the fact that functionally, at the end of the Skywalker saga, a Palpatine is now taking the name of the greatest family of heroes in the history of galaxy as her own, after assuming their property, vehicles, droids, weapons, probably the money out of their space wallets. The fact that when she's asked who she is, she elects, having never been given a true last name her entire life, and only finding out about 10 hours prior that she technically was a Palpatine the entire time. She chooses the name of what Joseph Scrimshaw refers to as her two Jedi Masters as her name, as a show of solidarity to anybody who has a family that isn't theirs, found family. He made a point of saying how particularly impactful the concept is for perhaps somebody who has been adopted or who is in a situation where maybe they're not with their proper biological family for whatever reason, and the concept of found family, and specifically of being someone who rejected the name of the most evil person in the universe and assuming the name of the family of the greatest family of heroes in the galaxy is a fitting way to show that good truly in the end will triumph over evil. The other way that you can take it is that Emperor Palpatine's granddaughter got to see everybody die, got all their stuff, and then at the end of the movie just declared herself a Skywalker. I prefer my explanation, technically Joseph Scrimshaw's explanation, but I also understand why people feel the other way. So Jeff?
I'm going to counter.
Okay.
There are 5 known living descendants of Adolf Hitler still alive. I thought it was a bit redundant, but you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
There are 5 living descendants left of Adolf Hitler. Do you want to know what they did?
I do.
They all got together and they agreed to never, ever reproduce, because even though their last name isn't Hitler, the fact that they're related to the guy brings them that much angst and shame. And the fact that Rey is related to effectively the Star Wars equivalent of Hitler, she can just shrug it off and say, "Oh no, I'm Rey Christ. It's good. I'm not Rey. I'm not. Or you get what I'm saying."
I do get what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right, Kev, how do you feel? I guess we already know, but I don't
No,
want to
you might not. I think that is a beautiful sentiment, and here's the thing. I'm not averse to this in practice. The idea of it is it works on a lot of levels, and I think that there is a lot to be said of defeating evil through choice. Like, there's a lot of negative history in tons of people's families, and just saying and resigning yourself to being a certain way because of where you came from or what your name is flawed. And so I applaud their decision to have her take up that name. She has found her family. My issue is we never fucking see a family. I never get outside of Finn. I truly never felt like she was okay. Maybe Chewie and Han, kind of. She seemed more content. She seemed more interested in finding her own family. They didn't put in the legwork to make me believe that this was her family. They argue. Okay. They really they spend more time accomplishing goals. There is never a down moment where they're getting to know one another. They have to use forced exposition in the middle of an activity. There's no in transit moment like when Luke is training on the Millennium Falcon and Han's like giving him shit and he's like, "You don't believe in the Force, do you?" There's never really chill moments, and we also don't ever learn that you should let the Wookiee win in Hollow Chess. You know what I'm saying? There's no real authentic family fucking moments.
And
the scene at the beginning where they're playing Hollow Chess with Chewie. I mean, I thought it was entertaining enough, but it was definitely a Disney version of what you're describing, and it doesn't really fulfill what you're trying to convey.
So we're getting to an important point here. I'm going to deviate fully. So
God fucking damn it, Jeff.
Kevin, shut up.
You should have seen him waving his arms.
There is So this goes to show you that there's still no credence actually given to the OT, even though they say there is. If they wanted to build on what the OT had, they could have said something akin to, because in the Rise of Skywalker, they say if Rey strikes down on Palpatine, that his spirit would enter Rey's body and basically he would be piloting Rey's body, for lack of a better term. Now, what they could have done was explain that when Luke grabs his lightsaber and goes to swing at the Emperor, and Vader and Vader parries, that he wasn't defending Palpatine but defending Luke, because he could still do that with.
Okay.
Like so many things they could have done that could have built on the lore, that could have that could have better explained past actions, and they just fucked it up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to get that point.
No, that's okay. Kevin had his moment where he blew off a little steam, and now
I would like to end on one thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
After Leia's parentage and genealogy is revealed, does she go by Leia Skywalker?
No, she continues being Leia Organa, and the crux of the book Bloodline is the New Republic Senate becoming aware of her family lineage through another senator discovering the information through a secondary source and revealing it in a session of Congress that Leia was attempting to gain some support for the resistance in, and then everything starts to fall apart because of everyone finding out that she was in fact Darth Vader's daughter, and that's what led to her basically having to leave the New Republic Senate, and that's supposed to be part of the reason why we find her in the state that she's in at the beginning of The Force Awakens, where you can't understand why she's not with the New Republic Senate and why the Resistance is separate from the Republic Navy.
Okay, that is a very detailed answer, but I'm more focused on the fact that it's not, even when she's presented with this new reality in the movies, she does not become Leia Skywalker. She was raised by Bail Organa. She was raised and is a princess of the Organa family. That's who she is. That's who she chose to be. Even when presented with her real identity, her real quote unquote family, she stuck by her name. So, and I think that's really great and appropriate. And that is, I think, a very strong message to the idea of adopting and found family. That, oh, you are the legacy of one of the most powerful beings to ever live, good or bad. Your brother, who you could share a name with, is the greatest hero to ever live. No, you're still no, I'm still Leia Organa.
Yeah,
you know.
I'm totally agree with Kev here.
Yeah, I understand.
So it's not that the concept is bad. I think that's a beautiful concept. But Leia is, and it's not even like they intended to do this. That is the concept done correctly.
But they want to pass that. But they want to demonstrate that concept through Rey because she's the bestest ever.
Correct.
Yeah, I think of moments that could have been done better, and I'm drawn to this unintentionally, I think, beautiful scene that was done by Hack Fraud Media when he was talking about how Luke gets turned. Yeah, like that's on paper you think, oh, that's such a dumb idea. Get like editing that, but it works so well that I watch it like all the time, just because I'm thinking if I had seen something like this, holy shit, I would have cried. To see a man talking with his father.
For those of you who don't know what Kevin is talking about, there is a YouTube channel called Hack Fraud Media, which we've mentioned before on this on the Emperor Experience, and the gentleman in question does an impression of Mr. Plinkett that almost makes me wonder if the guy who does Mr. Plinkett started his own channel separate from Red Letter Media and started doing Star Wars breakdowns separate from the Red Letter Media guys, but with more detail. But when you listen, you can tell that it is an impression of the Mr. Plinkett guy. It's just such a good impression that the level of Asperger's that this guy has is just, I mean, if you could measure Asperger's with midichlorians, the guy from Hack Fraud Media had his midichlorian Asperger number is higher than Master Yoda's, because this guy, on top of doing an absolutely incredible breakdown of The Last Jedi, does it the entire time doing an impression of Mr. Plinkett from Red Letter Media, and it sounds better than Mr. Plinkett. And this particular scene that Kevin is describing is his interpretation of how Luke should have rejoined the battle in The Last Jedi, and specifically when he became reconnected with the Force. It should have come about by, in this particular instance, they use the image of Mufasa coming out of the clouds, but it's obviously the voice of James Earl Jones that's supposed to be the connection, and it's James Earl Jones's voice speaking to Luke, and he uses dialogue from The Lion King that fits the narrative of what Luke needed to hear in The Last Jedi so well that you, after you see the scene, like Kevin was saying, he watches it fairly often, you want for it so badly to be in the movie that if for whatever reason
the just to really
to the part where this scene would come up, and I guarantee you will be even more disappointed with The Last Jedi after having watched Hack Fraud Media and realizing how much better the movie could be just with the inclusion of this one scene. And it just makes you that much more annoyed with
the minute
what went on in The Last Jedi.
The minute Mufasa starts talking, like it's already great in my eyes. I think this is amazing. But as the scene ends and Mufasa starts to say, and this is a testament to the editing and the audio mixing that was done. The minute Mufasa starts to say, "Remember who you are my son and the last Jedi," and it like it almost seamlessly dovetails into that actual line from Vader. It almost locked in the scene as being, it was so jarring, it almost became canon to me that like this had to have been what happened. It works too well. It is too on the button. Like
it's almost the way that people who grew up with the Star Wars storybooks swear that the scenes with Biggs on Tatooine existed in the original cut of Star Wars because they read the storybook so many times that they now just plug those scenes into the movie in their head, and that's how they see the movie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there was a point in my 20s when if I had a conversation about Star Wars with somebody, every once in a while somebody would say like, "Oh yeah, weren't there scenes on Tatooine that got cut?" And da 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 da. I'm like, no. I'm like, everybody thinks that because the storybook had scenes that got edited out that developed the relationship between Luke and Biggs that all got cut for time. And then the one scene when Luke and Biggs reconnect in the Yavin 4 temple before they attack the Death Star is supposed to be the payoff, which then shows why Luke is kind of sad when Biggs blows up. But that's neither here nor there. So, moving on, the very last thing that I like about The Rise of Skywalker, Wedge came back.
All right, yeah.
Very simple. Wedge came back. Let's fly, Lando. Now, granted, he wasn't flying his own ship. He wasn't flying, his rogue leader X-Wing like he was in the Battle of Endor. But he was in the belly gun of the Falcon, which was bitchin'. Now, for those of you who don't know, Wedge was played by a gentleman named Dennis Lawson. Dennis Lawson has a very fulfilling career as a stage actor in England and felt no compulsion at all to be a part of the sequel trilogy. And it was made very public because being one of the legacy characters, a secondary character, but a legacy character that people really liked because his inclusion in the expanded universe books and so forth was pretty extensive. He chose not to come back for The Force Awakens. So I'm assuming that the check they floated across his desk must have been pretty substantial for him to come out of retirement. But man, am I glad he did, because I love Wedge. So that's pretty much it.
All right.
So
good flying, Lando. Ed screams his fucking head off in the theater.
I was giddy like a child because I wasn't sure it was gonna happen. I had heard that he was back in the movie, but I wasn't sure. And when I saw him, I was thrilled. So dislikes. The first thing that I didn't like about the Rise of Skywalker was how quickly the opening sequence jumped from the TIE fighters approaching Kylo's Star Destroyer to immediately down to the surface of what we now know as Mustafar. And for those of you who are saying to yourself, but I thought Mustafar was a lava planet. Okay, well, if you follow the extended material,
here we go.
In current canon, there is a video game that you play about Darth Vader. And in this video game, when you play it to its completion, one of the things that you do is you inadvertently start to heal Mustafar by completing one of the missions where you... I don't actually know what happens because I didn't play the Vader VR Experience video game, but I've gotten the rundown of it from the Star Wars Explained channel. But needless to say, one of the missions that you complete as Darth Vader in this game while you're on Mustafar is the land starting to heal itself. So where we are on Mustafar when Kylo is cutting down these tribesmen or whatever they are, they're on Mustafar, and he is searching for the first of the two Wayfinders. Well, a lot of stuff got cut out of that scene. One of the major things that got cut out was the Eye of the Webbish Bog spider that apparently has a conversation about being a minion of Vader's. And he communicates with Kylo Ren about the Wayfinder before he gives it to him. That's all fine. I'm fine with that stuff being cut out. What I'm not okay with is the fact that there should have been just a teeny bit of lead-in in terms of expository dialogue between Pride and Hux on the bridge of the Star Destroyer in reference to Kylo going on what they feel at this point is a wild goose chase, because up to this point in the story, Kylo has produced nothing from his search for this Wayfinder or for anything else involving the furtherance of his power. So Hux is extremely annoyed that they're on this wild goose chase and are stuck with Kylo Ren. And then Pride apparently makes a comment about how almost beautiful it is to watch Kylo Ren as he moves across a battlefield, cutting down enemy soldiers. And that's what leads into him recovering the Wayfinder and then immediately going off to Exegol. There was quite a bit more that was included in that opening scene that I think would have given a lot more depth to what was going on. Just diving right into this action sequence, which just felt very forced.
Everything in the movie feels forced. All right, let's go. Let's move on.
So moving on, the second thing that I don't like is the gentleman that is the character Mary from The Lord of the Rings, taking basically all of the lines that Rose should have had at every team meeting on Agent Kloss.
I wonder why that was, because no one likes Rose. I'm sure it's a focus group meeting. They're like, no one likes Rose. Cut.
More than likely for two reasons: is that A, no one likes Rose, or at least they don't like her character, and two, the gentleman who played Merry in The Lord of the Rings is also a friend of J.J. Abrams, and J.J. promised him a part in the movie, so they decided to make him the Resistance historian, and that is supposed to be the background for why, when they're having their big team meeting, he's the one that speaks up in reference to Palpatine returning and offering some rationale as to why Emperor Palpatine returned. So, in case you're wondering why suddenly there's this random dude who knows about dark science and secrets only the Sith knew, it's because JJ promised him a part in the movie and they shoehorned him in. And frankly, I think that all of that dialogue would have worked much better coming from Rose, who was an established character. And I think that giving her that dialogue would have helped to redeem the ridiculous part in The Last Jedi that she had.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
Just because there's been a bit of controversy over that line.
I have to use the bathroom.
Got it. Jeff, you can give me your thoughts on this and I'm just going to refer to him as Mary because I don't know what his actual name is. When Mary says dark science or dark magic, cloning, secrets only the Sith knew, I read it as he's throwing out a few suggestions and then a comma, and then saying, and then a period, and then saying secrets only the Sith knew. I'm throwing out a bunch of suggestions, but everyone is taking it to mean that dark science cloning or dark magic cloning, secrets only the Sith knew are like he's saying that those are the two things it could be, and that they were secrets only the Sith knew. Do you understand what I'm saying, or am I coming off crazy?
No, I don't know what you're saying.
You don't know what I'm saying.
I don't know what you're saying at all.
Ah, okay. When you hear that line, do you think he's referring to cloning and the other thing as secrets only the Sith knew? Like that those two things are secrets only the Sith knew?
I don't know. No, I think secrets only the Sith knew is separate from cloning.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But everyone's saying, "Oh, they think that cloning is secrets only the Sith knew," and I'm like, "No, that's like one of the few things I didn't like about the Mahler video, was that."
Yeah. No, I do agree with that. I think it was there were the two separate thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's going in too deep just because I think the line itself is such a flimsy thing that I had to throw out there to sort of halfway explain how Palpatine could be back, but like, I don't know. Don't overreach. Don't overreach when you're hating on this movie. I am showing you that it's very easy to hate this movie.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to play the role as the positive guy in the high school debate that we're having right now.
Yeah, I was just talking about, and I would love to your opinion real quick. When Mary, and that's what I'm calling him, says dark science cloning, or what's the line? Dark magic cloning.
Oh, secrets only the Sith knew.
Okay, do you think that he's saying that dark science and cloning are secrets only the Sith knew, or is he throwing out two suggestions? Period, and then sort of a general, I don't know, it could be secrets only they knew.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, because there's this narrative going around by people who also don't like the movie, who I otherwise would think are correct and great and should have all the sex forever, that he's saying that dark science and cloning are secrets only the Sith knew, and I would just say, stop. That is not how grammar works. Yeah, don't nail him to the wall for something that's obviously like not what you think it is.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand. That's exactly what the people who just want to be mad are saying, but that's not what he said.
Okay, thank you. Because I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't make the line any less ridiculous.
Oh, it's still
Yeah.
stupid. It's the flimsiest excuse for why this guy who fell down a nuclear reactor is still alive.
And then exploded afterwards. So he exploded twice.
Yeah.
So moving on. Lando staying on the planet that he and Luke lost the trail of Uchi on makes no sense beyond plot convenience. And I put in the parentheses that he is a galaxy-wide playboy. And the reason why I put that is because obviously all he would have to do, even if he was stuck on the planet, let's say that he and Luke got separated and Luke left without him, all he's got to do is make a phone call and somebody that he knows within a parsec is going to come pick him up and take him wherever he wants. He's got hoes in different area codes.
Yeah.
So that makes no sense, and it made my head hurt, even though it helped the movie move along. Next thing I did not like. Poe having the time to be a spice runner before he became a Republic pilot and then a Resistance pilot makes no sense.
Yeah.
That doesn't even need to be discussed. Unless there was like a 6-month gap in time where he just went nuts and decided that for a little bit of life experience, he was going to deviate from what he had grown up knowing, which was being the child of 2 rebel heroes growing up on Yavin 4 underneath one of the 2 force trees that Luke Skywalker recovered from the Imperial Research Facility just so that he could run spice before he joined the Republic doesn't really fit for me.
No.
Even if I was a hardcore sequel trilogy fan, I would still scratch my head trying to find the wedge of time that Poe had to do these things on Kijimi with the Spice Runner crew. So that doesn't make any sense. Therefore, I don't like it. Next thing I don't like. How did one of Palpatine's new Death Star destroyers get off Exegol, find Kijimi, and destroy it when all the other Star Destroyers are stuck together in suborbit because they all need a navigation tower to help them get off of the planet?
Yep.
I don't like that. It's a plot contrivance. It makes my head hurt. Nobody cares about Kijimi. And frankly, if you're going to compare scenes of planets exploding, the scene of Alderaan exploding is way cooler than Kijimi exploding.
Yeah.
It just looks better. It just hits different, as the kids say nowadays. Next thing I don't like.
Well, real quick, if you're able to send one ship out, why not send all of them? Like,
That's the point.
That's the point. They did it entirely for plot convenience, and it didn't even really. It didn't really help the story move along. It was just an opportunity to show what Palpatine's Star Destroyers were capable of doing, with JJ knowing that none of them would be able to use their special Death Star cannons during the Battle of Exegol, and if they didn't use it at least once, then it would have been even more ridiculous. So I didn't like it. Next thing I didn't like. Palpatine destroying himself literally moments after fully restoring himself after draining the combined force of the dyad seems ridiculous.
Yeah, the Force Kamehameha fight. Yeah, that was dumb.
Yeah, the whole thing where when he pulled both Rey and Kylo to him, and you see like their essence fly out of them, and it hits his hands, and his fingers start to grow back. Visually, that stuff all looks awesome, but as far as, again, the way that the Force works, as Han put it, that's not how the Force works. So that was all done to just look amazing, and in the moment when you're not thinking about how it fits, was like, whoa.
I was not thinking that. I was thinking this is dumb.
But if you're sitting in the theater balling your fists up and thinking critically about every little thing, you would notice right from the rip that it doesn't make sense. And why is it if Palpatine was so underpowered and so beat up, why was he able to pull them both down to their knees and suck their energy out without them fighting back?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't make any sense. They both just dropped their lightsabers and he started sucking their life force out. When he got all of that power, all of a sudden the crane that he was on went away, and he had these beautiful new robes, and his belt had like a power strip on it that looked like Vader's chest plate. I mean, it was all just insane.
My boy was looking toit. Like, in fact, add that to my list of things I absolutely loved. Everything Palpatine related, but specifically that dynamite outfit. Like, I loved
so
it.
If you can separate it from the canon not making any sense, it's amazing. But if you think about it in terms of how this connects to Lucas, it's ridiculous. So moving on, a couple more things. Snoke's placement in the story. Again, I made a point of saying that I thought Snoke got done dirty in The Last Jedi. I thought Snoke could have been awesome. What they did to him in The Last Jedi broke my heart. And then trying to piece together the story post Rian Johnson and deciding the best way to explain Snoke was by having two pickled Snokes in a jar on Exegol, while all of the Sith eternal cultists are running around trying to keep the last rotting. Was just, on one hand, it was amazing because it was a monster movie from the 1940s, but on another hand, it just was insane.
Botched Snoke.
Just botched Snoke clones. No thanks. Although I will be eventually doing a diorama of that, so I'm going to have to figure out. It'll be quite the thing.
It's one of those terms that the more you say it, the less you think it's real. Like pickled Snoke clones.
Exactly. And going further into that, what was he when he actually was alive and connected to Kylo Ren? Was he fully a puppet? Was he a sentient being that also heard Palpatine's voice in his head? What the fuck was going on? So none of that stuff with Snoke and Palpatine made sense, and it wasn't made any better by anything that they included in the Rise of Skywalker. It literally just made it muddier. No resolution for Finn telling Rey what he wanted to tell her. The word on the street is, based on what JJ says, is that he was trying to tell her he was force sensitive. But that doesn't really fit, because in a moment of desperation, when you think you're about to die, why would you say that? I can understand professing your love moments before you die, because that's probably the best time to tell a woman that you love her, right before you're drowning in sand, because at least then you don't have to deal with the repercussions of being rejected, right?
That's like me dying next to you and saying, Ed, I never got to tell you. I actually recently broke 5 minutes for my mile time. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Breathe in a mouthful of sand. Exactly. So we got no resolution for Finn and Rey, and then the final point. Actually, no, not the final point, but the biggest point for me, in terms of the one thing in the same regard that the Luke Skywalker narrative, had Luke Skywalker been treated differently in The Last Jedi, I could go pretty far to justify the rest of the movie if Luke had been treated right. In the same regard, I could go pretty damn far to justify the existence of the sequel trilogy as a whole if Anakin had been included in the appropriate measure in terms of his connection to the overall story and to Luke and to Ben.
I mean, I've said that a bunch on this podcast, so I don't need to really go any further with it.
You have. And then I put in parentheses the mystery box melted helmet. I think that the melted helmet of Darth Vader being in the movie since the beginning of The Force Awakens and having no other purpose than just to serve as a prop that reminds you that we are connected to the George Lucas universe, it just boggles the mind, especially when you add how convoluted Kylo communicating with it is, now that we know that the voice of Darth Vader in his head was actually Palpatine, and that because of that, we now know that there was never a connection made between the actual Force ghost of Anakin and Ben Solo, that the entire time he was communicating with this helmet, he thought he was communicating with Vader, and in actuality, he was communicating with Palpatine from the nether regions on Exegol. So that just makes my head hurt.
Yeah.
And then the final thing that really bothers me, in the same way that I was amped about Wedge being included, I was very upset about the limited use of R2-D2. They basically sat him at the foot of Leia's bed, and then he got to be he did get to be in the final battle of Exegol by being the astromech droid that accompanied Poe, but there was no real, like in the trench run where they're cutting back and forth between Luke and R2 trying to keep things running, and then the TIE fighters chasing them. R2 felt included, obviously, in that movie and in the entire original trilogy, and then obviously in the prequel trilogy, his introduction is awesome. He's obviously included through the entire prequel trilogy, and then somehow in the sequel trilogy he becomes
Dio took over.
Yeah, he gets by the new droids, and then by the end of the Rise of Skywalker, he's gone back to being a like an extra trash can in the corner of the room. Like people are hanging their coats on him.
Outside of him restoring C-3PO's memory, what really does he do?
Nothing.
He receives the message from Bulio that didn't require having anything downloaded into him.
It was a cord.
Yeah, because as Mahler put it on an episode of EFAP, he could have written the entire message on a piece of paper and
tied it to a rock and dropped it in.
Thrown it through the hatch.
Win the war!
Back on it in like red crayon. So the final thing that I really disliked about this movie was the limited use of R2. And I guess in that regard, the limited use of Maz Kanata, even though she was a live-action puppet, which I give them credit for. So that completes my list of likes and dislikes for episode 9. There's obviously a lot more to talk about, and as we continue to go on with more episodes, whether it's during the quarantine or otherwise, the sequel trilogy will continue to come up. Maybe not every episode, but they exist now, and we will, as Star Wars fans, learn how to make sense of it all. I think ultimately the only thing that'll really cure the ills of the sequel trilogy are time and perspective, and perhaps maybe extra material that comes out will help flesh things out. I still have yet to read the novelization, which I've been told has quite a bit of extra material that, if you care, should help to flesh out certain things. So I'm looking forward to reading that. And maybe we'll revisit some of these points after I've read it when we do another episode. So with that being said, this brings us to the end of the Amperu Experience, Episode 9, Criticism and Breakdown. I am your host, Edward Scissorhands Burbridge. Calamity the cat is sitting on my lap. Jeff's running the Lopty Neck music for Kevin Bradley. If you are not already on target, I urge you to get on target and then stay on target. Stay on target. And don't get sick.
All right. Are we out?
Yeah.